Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I appreciate those of you that are already jumping on live. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us today. As you know, the Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, we are talking about the gap between selfless and selfish. We have Dawnita Brown here to share her teachings on an action she calls self-full, which I just love. At one time, Dawnita was set on becoming a global citizen with a vision board filled with adventure and volunteer work. In 2018, that vision came to a streaking halt when her mother had a stroke. She watched as her life pivoted drastically to long-term caregiver. With vibrancy still bubbling from within, she saw an opportunity to build upon her situation. Dawnita now educates, equips, and encourages caregivers to live a life of self-fullness while caring for their loved ones. Welcome, Dawnita. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. I love the intro. Thank you.
Girl, you got a lot going on over there. And I loved hearing your story. And I'm so excited to hear more and the vision, just the vision that you have for you, for what you're building. I think that it's so necessary and it's so crazy because things happen in our lives and sometimes it could kind of be like, and then sometimes individuals who have these things come upon them turn them into just something that is so necessary. And I think that that is your story. So I would love, before we jump into anything, I kind of want to just like what's going on, what's going on now. Tell us a little bit something of something good that's happened within the last 12 months, something not so good that's happened within the 12 months, just so we can get a feel for kind of where you are now in your life. And then we're going to jump in.
Okay, sounds good. So, over the 12 months, actually, in the beginning of the year, I said that this is my quest to self love. For so long, I have been my worst critic. I said, let me give myself some grace. So, I am a full time caregiver, but as you mentioned, I've also turned my mess into my ministry, which means that I started a business. I have merchandise for caregivers, as well as a support group for Black daughters specifically that are caring for their parents called the Binti Circle. And I offer coaching and consulting, as well as a podcast called the Self-Full Caregiver Podcast. So these things have definitely materialized over the past 12 months. However, the struggle has been doing it all within the past 12 months. So it's a lot being a full-time caregiver, like that is my priority, and then trying to do everything else and thinking about numbers and goals and all of that I had to really stop and give myself some grace and to prioritize. And I think that's so important for all of us. And it goes along with being selfful. And as you said, it's that sweet spot between selfish and selfless. And while I really tailor it toward caregivers, it is everybody, right? We're constantly giving of ourselves, being selfless. We think it's a badge of honor when in reality it's reckless. And then we feel like we're selfish, being selfish when we say no or I can't do it, or I'm going to take a day for myself, or 2 or 3 or a week. We feel selfish. So getting into that place of selffulness where you're doing both, you're taking care of yourself so that you can better do whatever you need to do and take care of others. So I would say the best is being able to see the gifts and the visions that God has given me for helping other caregivers. And then on the flip side, God, how do I do it all? Or do I do it all at once? So that's the challenge, and really trying to figure out what matters most at this point, what to focus on, what to really hone in on. And so I think the business part is where I struggle. So again, that's been kind of like that struggle part for me.
I get it.
I'm on the struggle bus.
I totally get that. I want to send just a quick shout out to those that are jumping on live right now. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with Dawnita and I. Since we have a room full right now, Dawnita, I would love for you to kind of share. I think that your story is so incredible, and I'd love for you just to kind of, share a little bit about your journey and what's gotten you to where you are now.
Okay, so my journey started way back when I was in high school, and I wanted to be a radio broadcaster. And so I was discouraged from doing that. And I went to college. I majored in mass comm the first year, and then switched over to business management. So I think throughout that time in my life, before I was in relationship with God, I was just kind of doing everything, and not really seeking what He wanted me to do for my life. And so out of that, I became a stay in school student with the federal government. So while I was in undergrad, I got a job with the federal government. And so back in the early 90s, that was like the best job, right? So you thought about government and security and all those things. And so I was there for 9 years. I became a building manager for General Services Administration. And that's when I got in a relationship with God. Oh, you know what? After a rough breakup. So we're transparent, we're honest here. In 1998, I met a married man. And so I started dating him, and I was young. I was very impressionable. And so I, was 9 years younger. And so I dated him for 2 years. And then after the 2 years, that's when, he got separated. I thought we were going to be together, only to find out we weren't. So it was like this big loss for me. And so that's when when God found me after that really, really bad decision making. And then as a result, bad breakup. And so that's when God found me, and I got closer to Him. And then like early 2000 is when, we broke up, and my life changed. I said, God, I want to live for you. I want to live for you. And like I said, I was a stay in school student, and I worked for the federal government. I had gone from a grade 3 to a grade 12. And at that point, it just felt like I was not fulfilled. I was making the money, I had the grade, but I was not fulfilled. So in order to justify me resigning from a good government job, I enrolled I enrolled into 2 master's programs. Now I had already had 1 master's, because in order to be in a stay in school program, you had to be in school. So I found a master's program just so I could keep my job without having to go out through the civil service and apply and all that. So I registered for two graphic design programs. These are very high intensive project driven programs. So I took one at Maryland Institute College of Arts and University of Baltimore. So it's like, why am I doing this? So at that point, I felt like I was going to just slip my wrist, because it was so much.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 2004, my grandmother got sick, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So I took care of her. And then I just, kind of I resigned. I resigned from the federal government and I started consulting. I got a part-time job with a wonderful organization called The Leadership. And I really started coming into my own in terms of doing things that I wanted to do. Like I co-founded girls organizations. I was a huge youth advocate. I was teaching kids. I was doing all of the things. And then in 2008, I was like, you know what? I'm doing way too much to make ends meet. So I'm doing like all these many different wonderful things. But again, it was just it was a lot. It was a whole lot. So in 2008, I applied for a full-time job, and I won't say the place where I work, but just know that it's a very prestigious place and it's a place to be from, not a place to be. So I worked there for not even a couple of months, I think 1 month, a couple of days before I realized this is not for me. Like it was very, I was, let's say I was making $5,000 less in 2008 than I was in 2002 with the federal government. I was working way more hours.
Wow.
I was working on the weekends. I was traveling. I was doing all these things. I said, this is not healthy at all.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my folks in the federal government, and I actually ended up back in the same office that I had left for the same agency. And I just started working there. I was making $27,000 more. So this was in 2009. And so God just brought that full circle where if you step out on faith and trust me, I got you. So when my mother, we actually had it was terrible. She was like, I can't believe you quit your job, all that, because she worked for Internal Revenue Service. We worked in the same building.
Wow.
She was a grade 11. I was a grade 12. And she was like, I can't, so I ended up back in the same agency, the same office. They actually, because I was trying to get rid of everything, all of my leave was like, I'm never going back to the federal government. Never say never. I ended up, I had sick leave on the books, like a week and a half of sick leave. So they reinstated all of that. And so everything was great. I went back, I had my work-life balance. And then into a former colleague from GSA had called me. She was at another agency. And she was like, we have a job here, would you be interested in health and wellness? And this is before wellness was sexy. Like I didn't know what wellness was. I had to look it up. So
Yeah.
she was saying you'll be able to do your graphic design, you'll be able to do wellness, you'll be able to do event coordinating, all of this stuff. And I said, well, it sounds good. Long story short, I got that position. I was the wellness coordinator for CMS, and it's for Medicare, Medicaid services for 5 years.
Wow.
And I absolutely loved it. I started a farmers market on campus. It was the largest program for employees, and it was all around health and wellness. And I absolutely loved it. And then in 2014, my dad was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a treatable, not curable cancer. He lives in LA. I flew to LA. I thought I was going to be there for 2 weeks. I ended up there for 4 months. So I was teleworking before, again, folks were teleworking, and then my manager just was not understanding. And so I said, when I come back, I want to go on a detail just away from her for a while. So they say you quit people, not jobs. And that's essentially what I did. And so I put in for a detail with the training team. And when I returned from taking care of my dad in 2014, I went on a detail. Actually, I started the detail, in 2015, because I went back to LA. He had a procedure done. So I was back in LA for 2 months. And so I got picked up permanently with the training team. And in the training team, we facilitate several classes. So I needed to be certified for some of the classes that we teach. And so one of them is the Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had it was a lot that went along with that. The story, I'm going to have to write it all in my book because the details are just like crazy. So anyway, I'm gonna, you guys go with me. I'm in Herndon, Virginia in the Marriott where the training is. And so the day of the training, I walk into the banquet room and I pick a table out of all these tables, 20 tables in the banquet room. I sit at this one table and I'm around all of these folks that have done international work. And so I sit next to this lady that talks about her experience with the Peace Corps. She had served in the Peace Corps. And so I was like, I thought you aged out of Peace Corps because, mind you, I'm a federal employee at the time. I wanted to work as an expat, which means that I would get paid and get my cost of living while I'm working. And she said, I served in the Peace Corps and I served in Senegal. And she was talking about her counterpart. And at the time, I did not know what that meant, in terms of Peace Corps. And I said, well, I thought you aged out of Peace Corps. And she said, no, I thought it was for college students, like straight out of college. She said, no. She said, Jimmy Carter's mom served in India as a Peace Corps volunteer in the 60s when she was in her 60s.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm single. I don't have any kids. At the time, my dad was healthy, and still is, and thank God. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to join the Peace Corps. So, of course, everybody thought I had lost my mind. Um, at the time, I had two cars. I had my dream car. I had my older car, which was my dream car at the time. So I still had those two. And I needed to downsize, like all of the things. I served in Swaziland, and Swaziland is where my bishop from a couple of years ago had served. I mean, well, not served, but she was the bishop over Swaziland. So there were some dots that were being connected. My cousin's cousin at the time was the ambassador. So it felt like confirmation to me. I had taken Esther, the Bible study Esther, and I felt like for such a time as this, right, for me. And so I'm thinking of all these things. I feel like God is just sending me all these confirmations. And so I joined the Peace Corps in June of 2016. And my job was gracious enough to give me a leave of absence. It was leave without pay. But my job was my job for 3 years. I had 3 years to, serve, come back, get readjusted, and then go back to work. So I had an incredible service. I co-founded an organization for girls in US and Africa called Black Girls Global Exchange. We brought 18 girls over from the States to, exchange with their Swazi and South African peers. It was beautiful. It was incredible. This was in March of 2018. All of my friends came over. I had friends come over throughout the summer. And I was like, yes, this is great. I'm seeing all my friends. I was able to send things back home with them because I knew that I wanted to travel light because I was going to do an end of service trip. So I was traveling to Egypt, Senegal, Ghana, and then I was going to do a healing yoga retreat in Boston before I came home. Well, this was in August. I'm planning my trip to Ghana specifically because my ancestry traces back to the Fanti people in Ghana. So I'm really excited about that. And, I was going to be there for 2.5 weeks. And so it was around 10 p.m. my time in Eswatini. And I'll probably use Eswatini and Swaziland interchangeably because the king changed the name from Swaziland to Eswatini in 2018. But I called my dad because of the time difference, it was hard for us to really connect. He was in LA. I was in Swaziland. So it was a 10-hour difference. So I called him. And when I called him, I could hear him say, "This is her on the phone now." And I said, "Well, who are you talking to?" And he said, "I'm talking to your Aunt Jean, who is my mom's sister." And so I'm thinking, like, it's August. It's nobody's birthday. Like, why are y'all talking kind of thing, And so he said, "She can hear you talking to my aunt." And my aunt said, "Tell her that Joan is on life support." Joan being my mother. And so I lost it. I mean, I'm over 8,000 miles away. I find out my mother's on life support. I'm planning these incredible trips. and now I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. And so I'm sitting in my dining room slash office, because I had a one room rendezvous in Eswatini. And so I'm sitting there, and then I just lost it. Like I was rolling on the floor. I had marble floor, and it was July, so it was cold. So the cold floor, and um I don't know how long I was on the floor, just, you know. And then when I got back to the phone, my dad was like, I'm glad you got it all out. And then it was just like, okay, what do I do? So I called um, Peace Corps and informed them on what was going on. And then I called my host family, which we lived on the same homestead, but I had my own dwelling. And they came over, and we were just praying that my mother would live for me to say goodbye. And so um, Peace Corps was 2.5 hours away. So they asked me if I wanted to come into the office, but my family lived only 20 minutes away from the airport, and they had a car. So I said, well, no, I'm going to stay here and let them take me to the airport. And they were like 3 flights out of Eswatini to go into Johannesburg. Johannesburg was the flight that I was taking to Atlanta. Well, it was, to Baltimore, but I had a layover in Atlanta. So I wanted to take the latest flight out of Eswatini because I didn't want to have to sit in the airport all day.
Got it.
There was a lot going on. So anyway, I get to the air. The flight was delayed from Eswatini. I arrive in Atlanta. I'm sorry. I arrive in Johannesburg. I get on the shuttle. I'm looking around. I sit right by the door for the shuttle. And this woman gets on, and she said, "Who's going to Atlanta?" And I'm like, "Me." And so she was like, "Okay, well, we got to go because the flights, are going to." So we got off of the shuttle. And for all of you that are, remember the OJ commercial when he was running through the airport sprinting. If you're old enough, sprinting, I think it was like a Hertz commercial or something like that. That's how we were running through the airport. She was flashing her badge and saying, "Hey, I have to get her to the gate." It was almost like she was a guardian angel.
Wow.
She grabbed my laptop. She was running ahead of me, and I got very winded. And I was just like, "Go, go. I can't go anymore. Just go." And so she got to the gate, checked me, and told them everything. So by the time I got there, I could just sit down. And it was just it was crazy how it
Wow.
happened. It was almost like surreal.
Mhm.
And then when the flight, it was just they were boarding like as soon as I sat down. So I got on the flight, and when I got on the flight, I just started just crying, like
Yeah.
I mean bawling, and it was uncontrollable. And I'm walking to my seat, and people looking like I was thinking, people like, I hope she'll sit next to me. Like I'm thinking they thought probably I was probably scared of flying. I had a fear of flying, and probably like, please don't let her sit next to me. But I sat I sat in the middle, so in between they were the nicest gentlemen. The one on the left was a nurse practitioner, and he was flying into Minnesota. He was Zimbabwean. And then the one on the right, no, I'm sorry, he was Kenyan. Then the one on the right, he was, I can't remember where he was from, but they both just encouraged me. I finally told them after I got myself together what was going on. And they encouraged me. And the nurse practitioner, I was just like, I work out every day. I walk 2.5 miles each way to get into town. And I'm like, what is wrong? And he said, it's the stress. It's all the adrenaline. That's what really winded you. And so I was, you know, so I get to Atlanta. I called my cousin. There I didn't have service because, of course, I just had a SIM card, and thank God for Wi-Fi. My cousin picks me up. We drove to Bayview, Johns Hopkins, where my mother was in neurocritical care, and that started my caregiving journey. Like after that, that's my life has changed. Like I mean, I could. These are the things that we should embrace. you can make plans, but God is the best of planners. And he's the best of planners. So we have to be flexible. Um, we can't say what we won't do or can't do because you don't know until you're put in that situation. And we have to have an open mind. Like flexibility is key to life because it's ever changing and you have to be ready for the change. And so it took me a minute to get there, but that my life became caregiving full on. I didn't even identify as a caregiver with my grandmother and my father when I provided caregiving to them. I didn't even identify as one. So I think a lot of people don't. We just kind of do what we need to do. But navigating a healthcare system, having to deal with, having conversations with a social worker, knowing what to ask for, knowing what is available, knowing what's not covered, knowing the rights that you have, knowing how to advocate. I was thrusted into all of that with no one and no resources that I was aware of at the time that could help me. So I was super overwhelmed. And that's how everything with Hey Caregiver was birthed.
When did you find out that she was going to live?
Well, it was touch and go for a couple of months. So it was around October 2018 when she was discharged from neurocritical care or from the hospital to a short-term rehab facility. They're called skilled nursing facilities. And this was after I did all of my research to get her at a place that I wanted her to be, because a lot of times they will just discharge really quickly without the families
Oh,
having
wow.
any say. Yeah, they'll say we chose this place, and maybe you haven't visited or you haven't spoken with anyone there. So it was October 2018 when they discharged her to short-term rehab, and she was doing okay with the recovery. So although she was living, she was just existing. So I was okay with her transitioning because she was just existing. And I felt like I want her to live, I want her to thrive. And so she was bedridden. She was nonverbal. And so after 2 months, she was discharged. She plateaued in her therapy. So they discharged her in December of 2018. She came home with me. And so, of course, that was a huge learning curve. But she got sick in December of 2018. So she ended up back in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And once she was there, I had her discharged to the short-term rehab again because she had 100 days for therapy. And while there, she kept vomiting and everything. And we ended up taking her. She had a cardiology appointment. This was in January 2019. We got to the hospital and the ER doctor said that, well, we were waiting all day. They ran tests on her because you could just hear like air in her stomach. And so the ER doctor, when he finally determined what was wrong, he came back to us as it looked like as if he had seen a ghost. And he said she has pneumatosis of the intestines. And we have to rush her to Good Samaritan, which is the other hospital, because they have equipment that we need. So make a long
What
story
is that?
short,
Wait, what is that she had?
so pneumatosis of the liver.
Yeah.
So it was like air in the bowels. And then she had something else that's called colitis. And so
How do you get
basically,
air in the bowels?
so it could have been from her feeding tube, neglect really from the nursing home, to be honest. Because
Oh.
she was vomiting and they said that she was constipated. They did an x-ray and determined that she was constipated, but they did not have the equipment to do a CT scan. So it just so happened that the doctor was there that day. And so the nursing home doctor, normally he has biker's hours. He would be there at 9, 10, 11 p.m. So he just happened to be there during the day. He said, well, I don't know why she keeps vomiting. We'll send her out. And that's what happened. We get to the hospital. They tell me that we have to do surgery on her stomach. If we don't, then she's going to die within 2 days. So this was January of 2019. And so I said, I talked to her. I said, Ma, I said, they want to do surgery. If you have surgery, you'll have a colostomy bag. It'll be an uphill battle. And so I asked them to just treat her conservatively with medication, antibiotics. After she was there for a couple of days, they were like, well, we're going to recommend her to hospice. And so they recommended her for hospice, and she actually got accepted into inpatient hospice. And this was February. So January she was there, and then February, it was like early February. And so I'm sorry, it was January when when they gave her the prognosis of 2 days. And so it's kind of like the end of January. And so they treated her with medication after she was accepted into in-home hospice. And the doctor, I remember going into the hospital, the doctor said, we're not God. Only God could do this. Like it was a miraculous recovery. So they ripped up the papers at inpatient hospice. But when she was discharged in February, they enrolled her into in-home hospice. And so she was at home hospice. And after 3 months, she just started improving and improving and improving. And so she graduated from hospice. And now we are on 3.5 years of her not just living and surviving, but thriving. We watch television together. That's that self-will piece. We do a lot together. We watch game shows. I have equipment where we're able to get her downstairs and out. And I found a van on Nextdoor for $4,000 that my dad got us. So, I'm able to get her around and get her out and able to have her really, really have a life, although she's still bedridden. So it wasn't like an immediate thing, like, okay, she's going to live, she's going to be, good. It was really touch and go. And then even with that setback, it was still touch and go. But it was probably, I would say, a solid 1.5 years before we realized that, okay, she's good now. So much so I'd be like, okay, God, it's been 4 years now. Like, I'm not ready for her to go anywhere, but I'm just like, okay, I'm single. It's almost like I have this huge responsibility now. Can't just up and go like I used to, all of those things. But I'm grateful to have the opportunity to care for her, and love really plays a huge part in recovery.
Definitely.